Hello, brothers and sisters. The title of the message today is Being Led by the Hand of the Lord. Number 6, I left the denomination. I was in the midst of conflict against the denomination for a long time. My spirit became devastated. I visited praying halls and revival meetings in order to regain power of life. But the reality was the same. I could not experience any spiritual development. I thought I had to do something, whatever it may be. My theological college classmates became ordained pastors, but I could not become an ordained pastor. I thought it was a problem. If evangelist is delivering sermon, who will join the church? Our denomination will not appoint me as an ordained pastor anyway, but I could not wait any longer. So I made up my mind. Those pastors who supported me decided to lay their hands over my head and make me ordained pastor. I started that either become a pastor and I can legally deliver a message on the podium or go out of denomination. The leaders of our denomination sent theological students and conquered the podium and drove me out. I could not endure any longer. In such a way, 4 years of war was ended up. On one side, I became lighthearted. On the other hand, I had spite against leadership. I tried a dangerous plan. I was too tired out during that 4-year period of warfare against denomination. I did not have peace in my heart. I could not regain in our denomination any longer, remain in our denomination any longer, and I could not lead that kind of life continually. As I had the spite against leaders of our denomination, but I had to deliver messages in church anyway, my mind was blocked, so I went to praying halls and revival meetings. They were meaningless. The reality was the same. I discussed with deacons. They thought the same way. That's why it was easy for me to start. I can say leaving the church was already a fact. As I resigned the church, I had no place to go. I did not have any money. Nobody invited me. At that time, Deacon Jesu Yu, the senior elder in Holiness Church now, brought some money from his private mutual fund, and other deacons collected money and brought me 100,000 won. With that money, I got a room in Yeonhee-dong hillside. It was just 3-meter by 3-meter room with a kitchen. I barely moved into that room. At that room, it was facing westward. It was so hot in the afternoon. It was July 20th. It was the hottest day. My first daughter, Eunhae, was 7 months old. She was keep crying. Her lips were dried up. She became dehydrated. As it was too hot, I let her drink some water, and she stopped crying. It was a dangerous moment. I cannot forget that thing. Those people who helped me a lot always provided me grace. During that 4-year period of war, deacons never suggested any negative opinions, but those group of people moved like one body. Especially Deacon Sung Woo-jung, the former dean of Hansung Theological College, superintendent at the present time. He's a pastor in the Church of Christ now. Got a broken leg and put a cast around his leg because of a traffic accident. But he was a single-minded man. He did not give it up, our plan. But because of that accident, I thought it may not be God's will. I simply wanted to give it up. But in the middle of the war, I was a captain. I could not hoist the white flag. I endured 2 more years. In place of Deacon Jang, Deacon Yi kept the position firm and strong. Leadership could not do anything. They were my comrades when I was young. I can never forget about them. On another side, those people who pushed me aside, my mind was entangled with hatred and spite. If God did not endow me more grace, those people who tried to kick me out, I couldn't solve the problem of hatred and spite the rest of my life. But Lord endowed me enough grace. Instead of hatred and spite, I felt pitiful toward them. I rather thought I harassed them. When they said, "You'd better quit," suppose I said, "Yes, sir." I didn't need to harass them, but I was not mature enough. I protested against them beyond my power. Thus, both parties suffered so much damage and hurt. If we are not overflowing with grace, we have no other way but to fight each other. This is the life of Adam who came out of the garden. There is no big difference, dogs fighting over one bone, growling and fighting. Reverend An wanted to protect the denomination. He tried to fight against his disciples. He did not have anyone who can give him satisfaction. Some of his disciples got caught on his trap and gotten rid of. Like me, he could not get any successor. At the end of 4 years of war, he himself left the denomination, went to his son's house in America, and left the world so lonely. I should have recovered the relationship with him when he was still alive. His final moments became so miserable. I felt so sorry and regretful when I heard his death later. Why did he try to get rid of me? I don't know why exactly. He only knows the reason why. I could not hear from him. No matter how hard I think about it, I don't know why. The only thing I can think out is the Lord's arrangements for me to become mature. Suppose I remained at the denomination, it is clear that I could have not enjoyed God's blessing fully. The Lord prepared separately. I did not know the reason clearly and did not know the reason why we fought against each other with all our might, and both of us left the denomination. We cannot interpret with human thoughts. For him, the denomination itself was he himself leaving the denomination and go over to a foreign country was beyond his imagination. I myself, I just had that denomination only. I thought I would bury my bones there and never imagined that I would leave the denomination. But strangely enough, both of us left the denomination. I have thought about it for many decades, but no matter how hard I think about it, the conflict in the denomination itself is not all. I don't know the reason why. He shouted me at the back at the last moment, "Why are you trying to control the whole denomination?" He must have had some political meaning, but still, I don't understand. I had never thought about rebelling against or changing Reverend An's thoughts or will. I supported and respected him wholeheartedly. Then, who is the slanderer? This question will never be solved forever. But because of this incident, I could be transferred into an entirely different world that I had never thought about. I cannot help but to express it. This incident was mentioned. I could call it as a lightning strategy or underground cave strategy. In order to save me from there, God was digging the underground cave and arranged everything. Suppose this thing did not happen, I would remain in that denomination the rest of my life. But as I look back, it was not the right place to remain or bury my bones there. After 10 years passed, one day I visited theological college and I met the dean, Reverend Kapsu Kim. I prayed before dinner, Lord, what you have done is so marvelous. Those who have to remain, you let them remain here, and you let them leave, you have to leave. I just want to turn thanks to you. I worship you. Reverend Kapsu Kim, the dean of theological college, was one of the classmates. He was 8 years younger than I am. During the Vietnamese War, he was in the army. Nobody knew he could become the dean of theological college. He went to America to study and became the dean naturally. Who could imagine? Most people thought Reverend Hong Mo Kim would become the dean after he finished studying in America. But Reverend An did not like him. In his heart, he was saying no. Therefore, he had an expectation toward me. I was still a student, so I couldn't take part in a high-ranking official meeting. But after graduation, one day he said, let's get along well among ourselves. He took me to one his friends. Deacon Byung-jin Young was the owner of Sobok Hotel, and he was the department chief of finance of our denomination. We had dinner together. I did not know what's going on in our denomination, and I thought Reverend Kim will call me to America. But maybe I was the last disciple of him, and one day he cut my neck from the denomination. Maybe he had no one who he thought his successor among disciples. Maybe he was walking the lonely path alone. During that long and tough process of 4-year war, deacons of Yeongcheon Jungwang Church, they protected me until the last moment. We were separated by God's will, but I cannot forget them. They were Jae Soo-yu, Sung Woo Chung, Bum Sang Lim, Youngbok Park, Yang Ung Chung, Moo Be Lim, and Jong Jin Kim. Lord, because of my mistake, I made them suffer, and eventually we were separated. But the truthfulness and beautiful friendship we maintain, I cannot forget. Lord, bless their life and make it prosperous. I just made them suffer hardship, but Lord, bless them and impart my blessing to them. Compensate them with your grace. As I look back, I spent time together with them for 8 years. I feel terribly sorry that I could not lead them to an abundant loan of the Lord. I want to share this abundant grace with them. Wherever they may be, Lord, fill them with the same grace that I am enjoying now. Lord, when you return to us, let us share the same blessing together. On that day, not to be separated, bind us with the rope of your love. Lord Jesus, come soon. Amen. Subtitle number 7, God treated my thoughts that I try to go before God. After we moved to our rent room in Yeonhee-dong, July 1972, I didn't own anything. Our room was just 3 meter by 3 meter, just 2 pieces of furniture. We 5 people slept together, 5 people looking at among ourselves. We felt embarrassed. As my wife and 7-month-old Eunhae went down to my wife's maiden home in Cheongju. At that time, I had a glimmer of hope. I thought my wife was running a dressmaker's with her mother. If we work there together, at least we can make our living anyway. But even after 1 month, I heard no news from my wife. I went down to Cheongju, and the reality was so miserable. Zion dressmakers were downtown Cheongju City. It used to be a well-selling store and made a lot of money, but my father-in-law was running a men's tailor shop and went bankrupt. In the store, there was nothing else except the cutting board. That was all. as my mother-in-law was an excellent dressmaker, she received some order, and barely she was making her living. She could buy material in credit, but as she incurred too much debt, she could not display anything. I looked at their miserable reality. The glimmer of hope became the water bubbles. I could not fall asleep. My wife was sleeping with my baby, but I was sitting next to her. Oh Lord, I even could not pray to God. I suddenly thought I made a mistake. Why did I have a hope looking at my wife's home? God led me on and took care of me so abundantly and so vividly. But I thought, if my wife makes money, I don't need to worry about my living. I had a secret scheme in myself. I really wanted to be dedicated to my ministry without worrying about my money. Every year in the church, they have a general meeting. As the church was so small, they would argue about the salary of the pastor, and people became divided. It gave me a lot of trouble. And as I got married, I was thinking my wife can make money. And one day it was demolished. I was shameful. What am I thinking now? Did I come here with my own strength? I suddenly thought, let's go to Seoul. As I made up my mind, I felt a strange power inside of myself. Next morning, I told my wife, if I go up to Seoul, and I'll let you know, then please come up to Seoul. When you come up to Seoul, please come up with no attached emotion to your maiden home. But my wife was working at the dressmakers for 7 years, but as her father went bankrupt, she did not have any money before she got married. But her brother helped her to get married. She always had attached emotion, that's why. What is the countermeasure? The reality was not changed at all, but something seemed to be arranged in a neat way. I became lighthearted. On the way back, I thought about one thing. I visited one church in Guncheon. As the owner of the house introduced me, it was in the countryside. The church could accommodate about 100 people. His younger brother was running a textile factory. He helped and supported the church, and actually he built that church. That church had no pastor, so he asked me, can you come? That church was built by those people who followed famous Reverend Kim from Anyandong. Later, disciples were divided into two groups. As I took part in their service, they delivered the message purely like a group Bible study type, and people were very enthusiastic. They had the service in the morning time, they had lunch together, and then they had another fellowship at 2 p.m., and then separated. One unique thing was the pastor shaved off his hair. He was putting on Korean traditional costume and putting on rubber shoes. I visited another denomination. He did not shave off his hair, putting on Korean traditional costume and putting on leather shoes. They used musical instruments during the worship service hour. Except that, people looked so pure. I thought, I'll never become a pastor at any church before, but I changed my mind. If I am accepted, I'll go there. And I came up to Seoul. But the path was blocked again. In Seoul, I heard my friend Reverend Jung check that church one time. I could not utter a word. I came up to Seoul with light heart, but I had no solution at all. At that time, Deacon Youngbok Park brought me some money, and the amount was much more than the salary that I received from the church. He said that it was a special income. It was mysterious. He brought me his tithes to me until I received my first salary from Campus Crusade for Christ. And that was it. His role was finished up there. I was reminded by the story of Elijah in Kerioth Riverside. He received the food that crows gave him. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 4 through 6. Under the broom tree, he ate cake of bread baked over the hot coal and drank a jar of water. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 4 through 8. How could I receive God's grace just like Prophet Elijah? I learned the fact that God who called me, he also takes a responsibility even to a mediocre man like me. God keeps his promise faithfully. I bowed down to him. I was weak and shrewd, but the Lord was faithful and full of grace. Elijah fought against Ahab for the name of Jehovah God, fell into a difficult situation. God naturally supplied food and drink. But what I have done, I'm a type of person who always forget about God's grace and try to use human tactics. Wasn't I a schemer? The church which I started my ministry for the first time was an 18-year-old church, and there were 80 members. They did not have enough money to pay for the minister on time, but they argued about the salary. As I found out later, those lady deacons were so tough and rough, male deacons left the church. When I first entered, there were 7 to 8 lady deacons. There was just one male deacon, and he eventually left the church. So I started Reformation quietly. I recommended male deacons every year, but I did not appoint any more female deacons. And after 4 years, there were 7 male deacons. It was well balanced. Compared with the female deacons, thus everything seemed to be easy and rational. Handling the church business became smooth. It seemed that the church can be developed better. So I determined to carry out one important thing. When I was attending a small church, countryside church, I had seen our evangelist was suffering from poverty. Suppose I could make enough money, I wanted to pay him all the money. But it was pity that our evangelist was suffering from poverty. I closed up my mini mall, and my economic situation was also very poor. But I could not tolerate just looking at the poor evangelist. I proposed to 3 deacons in our church. I'll pay this amount of money. The rest of the money, please pay for the evangelist. They agreed inevitably. I supported the evangelist until I entered the theological college. I always thought, why should we discuss and argue about minister's salary? Youngchun Church was an 18-year-old church, but members were just 80 members. The economic reality was so poor. Every year they argued about minister's salary. Some would say, let's give him a raise. Others would say, let's cut down his salary. They were divided. So I made up my mind, if members paid tithes, I would receive that money. But if the people don't offer tithes, I'll not receive any money, no more salary. I read that during the Old Testament time, high priests lived on tithes of the people of Israel. So I proposed I'll receive salary with that tithe. Some people worried at the present time, nobody's offering tithes. What would you do? But the opposition party thought pastor is trying to snatch out their right to control the church. But as there was no reason to oppose my proposal, I declared and announced that in front of the church. But beyond their expectation, people began to offer tithes. Some people worried other offering would be decreased, but it didn't happen. New people offered tithes. Those people who worried felt released. But those people who tried to control the church finance, felt empty feeling. Thank you. Hallelujah. May God bless every one of you. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you again.